My name is Wajahat, and right when you asked this question, what popped in my head was pistachio.
We are here, very exciting, so exciting. An amazing guest, author, playwright, humorist, father. Yes. Man who many talents.
Man who married up. So not doctor, but married a doctor.
Which is the smartest type of man to recognize, the female supremacy.
Yeah, female supremacy. Punch up beyond her weight.
Exactly. Yes. Author of a new book that just came out that I just read. Go back to where you came from, and other helpful recommendations on how to be American. The one, the only, the amazing American. No, the amazing Wajahat Ali.
Thank you.
Welcome to Immigrant
awesome.
Jam.
Thank you so much.
Podcast. So I read your book last week in Panama, and it made me laugh, and it made me cry, and there was so much in there that I connected to, little things, like just the line where you go, I needed new pants to fit in. Oh my God. I was on a school bus, and this girl told me, nobody likes you because you wear dark blue jeans.
Damn, that's cold-blooded.
That was the first year we moved here, and I was like, I need new pants. Right. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God.
That's wild. Isn't that wild? Look at that. Because you came from Germany, you said at the age of 8. Yeah. And I was born and raised here, but as you know, and we'll talk about, like, my parents just did not give an F about me integrating at all. They named me Wajahat to blend. We needed new pants. Like, a superhero needs pants. And I was a husky pant kid, and you apparently had the wrong pants? What?
Wrong color, yeah.
Oh
apparently the wrong color.
That's cold-blooded. Kids are cruel.
Yeah, kids are cruel for sure. The book is also, obviously like a very straight shooting criticism and honest account of what it feels like to be Muslim in this country, to have brown skin in this country, to grow up cross-culturally. You talk about, how 9/11 changed your life and everybody's life in America who was Muslim or is Muslim.
Or looked Muslim-y.
Looked Muslim-y, exactly. And then somehow you make a U-turn and it ends on like a totally hopeful and beautiful note. Okay, maybe making a U-turn is wrong because it's always hopeful, but you ended on a note where, you close the book and you're like, yeah, we can make this a better place for people, right? And then there's all this about your family, your daughter having surviving cancer, your parents going to jail, you kind of hitting rock bottom, and it's a world. It's just an amazing book, and so the first thing that I wanted to know was, why did you write this book now? Just because you were at home?
Yeah, I was like bored. I'm like, everyone's like learning how to make bread during the pandemic. I'll just write a book. That's a good question. So, people ask, how long did it take you to write the book? So the one answer is 3 months. I could crank out the first draft. And the first draft was very good. But then the real answer is 40 years.
Right.
So it was something like when you have premature midlife crises that I do. I was about to turn 40. And I'm like, what have I done with my life? I got to do something. I'm going to turn 40. And then I'm going to die at 40. Because we always think we're going to die at 40. It's like, remember when you're 29? You're like, I'm going to die at 30. I have to do something. Yeah. But this was more like, it's the pandemic. Like you mentioned, my daughter had just survived cancer. The fact that we're alive right now, many people are not. 5 million people are dead. We're still in a pandemic, and we're about to hit the 1 million death mark in America aggressively. America's like chasing that number. And so I was like, well, maybe now's the time. Like, you feel it in your bones. Like, now's the time to tell this story. And parts of my story, because I've been very open and honest about my life and my work, and like you are in your work and your comedy, but there was a big piece of the puzzle that was missing, which was all the pain. And that like 10, 11, 12 years of pain. And there's just something inside me that said, at this moment, I feel like this particular story can help not only me, but also help connect the dots for people in America to, who really are like, how do we get here? How do we get to Trump? What's happening? And for the rest of us who have kind of survived both the American dream and the American nightmare, we have this unique vantage point as to what this thing called America is. And I'm like, maybe if I take the DeLorean and I drive the DeLorean from the past to the present, I can connect these dots for Americans through this very culturally specific story. And, like you mentioned, maybe I could also give us some hope, some earned hope. What I mean by earned hope is not the Hollywood ending, right, where let me give you a bow tie ending, and, it feels manufactured, it's cotton candy, it's fake, but it makes you feel good at least by the time you leave the theater and go to your car. I'm like, no, this is the type of hope where, like, you go through the forest, you face all the demons, you come out, you're alive, but you have the scars and the wounds.
Right.
So how'd you get the scars?
Yeah.
Talk about the scars. I think sometimes talking about the scars and the wounds helps you heal from the wounds.
Absolutely.
And then how can we still move forward? That's how I wanted to that's the journey I wanted us to go on.
So you knew that going in, that was very clear to you going into writing the book, that's what it was?
So this is the thing. So I'm trying to get Lucie to write her book because we just met, and it's one of those situations where you meet someone and you're like, I'd be your friend in school.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
I like you.
Yeah.
So I got into this podcast room, this podcast suite that we have in New York, and we started talking, and I'm like, I would have been like, I always get this like immediate, this type of vibe. You're like, I'd be her friend in school. And so I was asking you about your origin story, and then you were telling me about your origin story, and then I was like, it's like 7 minutes in, I'm like, have you written a book? And I'm like, you should write a book. You really should, about your family. Like, even your mom's story is amazing. And so the question then becomes well, what should I write a book? Who am I? Who will read this book?
Right.
I'm nobody. And I always tell people some of my favorite people are nobody.
Yeah.
And this particular book, for like 9 years, my agent was like, write a book. And I was like, I got you. And then I come to New York every year. We'd meet. He goes, do you have a book? I got you. And then it just something just clicks. And the thing that's hard about writing this book, and hopefully you can learn from this and makes your life easier, it's like, where do I start?
Right.
What's the spine?
Right.
What's the arc? And so my agent and then also my editor just said, listen, just tell your story. And then weaving in and out of that story, you can do this. I experiment in this book, and I'm proud of the fact that it's not a normal memoir, right?
Right.
I start with like hate mail.
Yeah.
And I punch you right out of the gut that this is going to be something a little bit different. And so he goes, but using your story as the arc, your story is strong enough to hold the weight of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Like the narrative. And then you can you can do a remix of a memoir and do the commentary and the humor and the history.
And what I think is so great about the way it's written is that, when you really get to the meat of your story, it's unexpected.
Yeah.
But what happened before getting to, your parents going to jail and you having to basically like keep this burning house from burning to the ground, is that you've laid out kind of like the emotional fabric of you through your experience growing up and through your thoughts on what it means to be an immigrant. And it's all very funny. You kind of pull the rug out very suddenly because it's very funny and like a little snarky even, for the first sort of like, I don't know, 50 pages.
Yes.
You're just kind of like, ripping on people and, really like, being very confrontational and very real about, how white people behave with immigrants or with brown people or with their stereotypes. And you lay out your family story and then all of a sudden
Boom.
It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But we sort of now know through which eyes you were sort of forced to see the world too, right? Because I think that's really interesting about immigrant experiences, because especially for people who are first generation and especially for people who aren't white, because you're born in this country, right? And then you're told that you're something else. My grandma always used to say to me, the Nazis told me I was Jewish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you are told you're the other.
Right.
and you're told why you're the other and how you're, and you see on TV, on the billboards, you read in the books how you're the other, and you internalize it.
Right.
And so
you're given a role.
Yeah. You're an American with an asterisk.
Yeah.
Or as Toni Morrison said, the rest of us are always hyphenated. Average American, Rust Belt, blue collar, Main Street always does the heavy lifting for white. The rest of us are the ethnic. You're also ethnic because you are a German Jewish immigrant.
Right.
But the thing is that many folks, I talk about how so many folks say, well, no, they're talking about the other German Jews. They're talking about the other Italians. They're talking about the other Mexicans. They're talking about the other Muslims. We chase whiteness.
Right.
Because when you land here, like think about your parents or my parents, right? So my parents came post 1965. My father comes. He's a young man, 18 years old, brown guy with his brother Sultan. He comes to this country, and without even you internalize it. You don't even realize what's happening. You go, who's winning?
Right.
A lot of whites are winning. Okay, who's getting beat the crap kicked out of them? Black folks. Okay, what team do I choose? I'm going to choose Team White.
Yeah.
And so you don't even realize it, but you chase whiteness. But then this country reminds you violently, you are not white.
Right.
It turns on you on a dime. And then all of a sudden you become them. And like your grandmother said, they tell us.
Right.
You're the Jew.
Right. And it's almost, I wanted to ask you this, do you think that, I mean, it's kind of maybe a silly question because who cares, but do you think that you would have as strong of a connection to your Pakistani background and even to your religion if it wasn't for that?
Well, no, that's not a silly question because oftentimes, right, if you were under pressure and you're marginalized, you have to hold on to it.
Right.
That much stronger, right? Because you're not part of the mainstream.
Right.
And not only are you not part of the mainstream is, as we're talking right now, ladies and gentlemen, trying to erase you. That's what's happening with the quote-unquote anti-CRT ban. CRT is not taught in elementary schools. I have 2 kids in the Virginia schools. I'm telling you, it's not in the lesson plan, not in the curriculum, right?
Bumps.
Yeah, they went after black authors. And everyone says, go after Toni Morrison. And the rest of us are like, we know how this plays out. Like, I did my best to warn, right? I know the playbook. And then they went after feminists, Handmaid's Tale. And as of just 2 weeks ago, they went after Jews because Mouse was too much. And I shit you not, one of the Tennessee board members said, I didn't like the ending.
And it's all, with Mouse, it's also crazy because it's not a book for children.
Yeah, but it's like
as it is.
Yeah, it's
not meant for children.
It's like a Holocaust. Like teenagers read it, right? Like you get in high school, right?
Yeah.
But they're like, no, too much. And then now it's literally don't say gay in Florida, right?
Right.
So if your story is not being told, if you're not telling your story, and I said this in the book, but I mean this, if you're not telling your story is always being told to you by others.
Right.
And it's just like your grandmother said, right? And you, if you're not sharing your story is being shared by others, and you have no power or control over your narrative. And then you will not be the protagonist of that narrative. And so often, the rest of us, we learn our place in America. You know, this going to schools, like they always ask, well, you know, should kids be learning this? How young is too young? Isn't 5 too young? And the rest of us are like, yo, when I was 5, I went to school. And that's when I learned my place in America when they said your skin color is the color of poo.
Right.
Now, what's that stupid language? Is it Urdu? Does it Burdu? How come you have green stuff in your kebabs? Because I'm like, it's delicious. I don't know. Mama, why do we have green stuff? Like, Mama, can we eat meatloaf? Mama's like, we will never eat meatloaf. And so for the rest of us that like we understand our place, like you know your rank in the streets, in the locker room, and in school. Age 5, age 6. Tag you're it. You're the bad guy. You're the other. And then as a kid, I'm sure your grandmother said this too. Like, no one wants to be the outsider.
Of course
When
not.
you came here as like a fobby kid at the age of 8, you're like, I will wear these jeans because I'm a rebel. You're like, I want friends.
Yeah.
Like, I'll wear whatever jean you want.
Hated it. Yeah.
You want to blend in, but you look at the TV screens. No brown folks, right? We're either the villains or the sidekicks, or we're completely erased.
Yeah.
And so that's why podcasts like this, stories, you know, people say, oh, you know, do stories matter? I'm like, stories are everything.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Because there's this through line of superheroes and you becoming a superhero or finding your superpower, which is storytelling.
That's
right?
That's all it is.
And the embracing of being the other. And I think you say when you go to college at like 23, you stop caring about your awkwardness. I was like, how did you do that? How? What was it?
It was 19. I was 19 when I stopped caring. So, and I didn't even answer your question properly. It's connecting the questions is like my parents, I don't know how your parents were. Like they were like, the joke goes is like immigrant parents fresh off the boat. Some of them burned the boat to integrate. Right. My parents brought the boat inside the home. Just didn't give a shit, right? 3 generations growing up. I grew up with my grandmother and my grandfather, very old school. In Europe, it's like this as well, right? Didn't teach me Urdu growing up. Didn't teach me English growing up, even though I was born and raised in this country. They're like, you'll learn. Like, dropped me off at preschool. Didn't speak, I only spoke 3 phrases of English. Very Muslimy, very Pakistani, traditional Pakistani cultures and cuisine. So I was lucky compared to a lot of folks that had this loving family that taught me to like flex and embrace my Musliminess and my Pakistaniness. Mm-hmm. But even then, when you're an American, you still internalize. And so I remember when I went, I mentioned this in the book, when being the other, being the awkward, mentioning, everyone wants to fit in.
Yeah.
I went home and I asked my mom at the age of 6, I want an American name. And I said, I have some choices for you. She goes, what? She goes, the name that I want is, I'll let you have W, because Wajahat begins with W, but I want to be Wilbur.
Yeah.
And not even like Walter. I'm like, what? Wilbur. And why Wilbur? Because we were reading Charlotte's Web and everyone loved Wilbur, the sweet pig.
Great.
And even I'm like, Mom, let's eat meatloaf. I want to eat meatloaf. All the white kids are eating meatloaf. Yeah. And my mom's like, we're eating biryani. We're not eating meatloaf. So even though I came from this community that was tight, and we went to Sunday school and we had the mosque, and you bring it in together when you have nothing, right? And I had this pride. Even then, Lucie, there was this realization: I just want Jennifer to look in my direction, and I want Chad to invite me to his house,
right?
And that and I was a fat kid, and when you're a fat kid growing up in the 80s and 90s.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, literally, yeah. There was no Dove soap commercial, ladies and gentlemen. There was no Lizzo.
Right.
It was, you were normal or you were fat.
Right.
Even the Lucies of the world used to make fun of me.
No.
She's like, no. She goes, I might not have the right genes, but at least I'm not fat.
I had black teeth when I was a kid. So
I had
my own problems.
You had why'd you have black teeth?
I had rotten teeth.
Wow. Really? Because of terrible
candy. I had bad I enamel, and I was just fucking candy monster.
Oh, so you were you were bad then. You were probably in a bad place.
I was shooting heroin in the cardboard box. My mom caught me once with a huge bag of candy, and I'll never forget this because it really worked. She was like, if you eat one single piece of that candy, I will take you to the hospital and have your stomach pumped.
And she was she wasn't even
she wasn't even.
Yeah, joke. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, she probably was, but the funny thing is, immigrant parents are so descriptive and they're violent threats and they work.
It was I was and then my sister ate it all, of course, in front of me.
The thing is that you were mentioning. So how do you get to the point where, you just want people, you want people. At the end of the day, you want people to like you. Everyone wants to be liked, and what's so terrible about being the other or internalizing the other is no matter what you do, you can't change your skin tone.
Right.
You can't change your nose. I guess you can, but you can't change the hair.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Whoopi Goldberg was talking about, right?
You learn to hate yourself.
Right.
And I was lucky that mine was mild. But then you and I are, have lived life, and we know how this paralyzes people.
Yeah.
Late to their life. And so I kind of recognized that, and I think it was 19. I think I was a sophomore in college. And I was like, I've tried to kind of straighten my tie, but my tie always goes crooked, right? Or, I'm left-handed. There's always going to be a smudge. No matter how hard I try, there's always going to be a freaking smudge on my palm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm done. So I'm just going to let my freak flag fly, and I'll just be me.
But that was just a moment?
It was kind of like this realization, finally, I think, but it took a while to get, look, epiphanies just don't, very few
Was
epiphanies.
it mushrooms?
Yeah,
Was it acid?
I have never taken drugs.
That's amazing.
And I've never drank alcohol. Isn't that wild?
That's amazing. Amazing. You don't need it.
Yeah, I'm like,
I don't like alcohol at all.
Maybe I would have written more books if I would have. No, but what happened was, this is what happened. This is the freaking trick that no one tells you. And that's why I was so pissed off at myself. The second I stopped caring, like there was a pep in my step. I was confident.
Everybody, of course.
Girls started liking me.
That's but that's the thing. Like, you want people to like you until you realize that people like people who don't give a fuck who likes them. And it's like a magic potion magnet. I remember my parents had this one friend who I hated, and I don't know why as a kid. I just hated this guy.
Even now you don't know why?
No, I don't know. I hated this guy. And he was like obsessed with me and like wanting to make me like him. He wasn't creepy. He would like always, be super nice, bring presents for me, like ask me if I wanted him to take me and his daughter ice skating or whatever. And I was like, nah, fuck off. And he like worshiped me.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's that. That's a magic potion. I mean, that's the thing about any like of these, also this like rock star thing. It's
right.
like people don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck if you like them. They fucking show up and smoke and have sunglasses on, and they don't brush their hair, That's cool, I guess.
No,
do you think that your parents,
No.
Do you think that your parents made a conscious choice, though, to not integrate you or to, bring the boat home? Or do you think you think so?
I think so, because like I asked him, I'm like, dude, you could have like taught me English at least.
And you're like, this thing called English?
My mom's like, my mom after like 35 years, and she goes, "Beta, like son," he goes, "Yeah, we probably should have, but look, you turned out fine." I think there is this immigrant parent, old school grit that like, yeah, look at you, we'll throw you in the fire, and if you survive, the fire will make you stronger. And then they kind of sometimes don't talk about like the trauma of like surviving the fire, because they oftentimes are traumatized also, and they have no language for articulating their pain, right? Well, I went deeper than the question that you asked, but like in the sense that my parents, I think, were like, you'll be fine, we have faith in you. You'll learn. And then my grandparents lived with us, right? So my grandparents were of the older generation.
Yeah.
My grandparents lived with me until they both died. My grandfather died in 1986. I was like 6 years old. And my grandmother died 10 years ago, and she lived with me. I used to take care of her. So I buried my grandmother, right? So for my my grandparents, my grandfather said this. This is how it went down. My grandfather's like, I'm going to speak to this kid in Urdu. So I'm not going to speak English in the house. And no one's going to speak English in the house. And my father, his son, he was like, oh, okay, then those are the rules. And no one spoke English. So I was telling you before, like there was a video, old school video, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing was streamed. There was this thing called the video cassette. and if you wanted to be kind in those days, you used to rewind. And so we saw these old videos with me and my cousins, also FOB kids, born and raised in America. You would think we were like in Karachi. Or like we're just speaking like fluent Urdu.
Yeah.
And I think there was just one of those things where my parents just didn't care. They're like, we're desi. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. We eat with our hands. We're going to eat biryani. We had like a small little peppermint garden outside. I used to go cut the peppermint. We used to put it in our food, green stuff in the food. There was a tailgate at a 49ers tailgate one time. I'm like, Ammi, they're all bringing food. I got to bring something. She goes, I will make burgers. Right? Yeah. You know where this is going. So I'm like, yay. And so she made these little patties. And then I remember like all the guys brought like their meats and the hot dogs. And then I took them out. I was so proud of these patties because I knew they were delicious. And all the kids were like, ugh, what's green stuff? And I'm like, what? He goes, what is that? I'm like, I don't know, burgers. And like, but like, why is there green stuff? I'm like, my mom put it there. And they're like, we're not going to eat that. That's gross. And I like sitting there like, tears welling up. So they went through the food, and there's always this one adventurous kid, and he was hungry. He was like, let me just throw this on the barbecue pit. One of them ate it. Like, this is good. The second one ate it. And then like my mom's patties were the hit of the night.
I love it.
So it's one of those things, like, can you imagine, like, I just feel like, what happens if you know your shit's good, and instead of being ashamed, you know, you just flex. Like, all right, you mock my patty, I'm going to sit here and eat this delicious patty, and your loss. That's the type of attitude I wish we had growing up.
Yeah, I wish that too. At the same time, I feel like, you know, doing this podcast and talking to all these immigrants, there is this like baseline of these people that have had to go through that process.
That's
and
right.
wrestle with themselves and wrestle with this like cross-cultural thing and be like, what is it? Am I ashamed? You know, what am I? And it really like makes for it's just opens your mind. That's all really it is, right? Like it just opens your mind to the fact that like everything, every perspective, every experience comes in all different shapes and sizes. But as you say in the book as well, obviously we have so much in common. You know, like I can identify with so much you write in your book, and we grew up
Isn't that wild?
Totally different worlds, and I was going, oh my God, yes, oh my God, yes, oh my God, yes, you know, every other page basically. Even the pain I mentioned earlier to you, you talk about how your parents, you know, don't have sort of that it's too much for them to really internalize the trauma that they may have caused, and that's also something that you had to process and kind of then accept in a way and be like, all right, that's also okay. I don't maybe have to be like, ugh, confront this, you know, like let's hash it out, like it's okay. So I think in a way, there's like a blessing and a curse of being an immigrant and growing up this way, growing up, being the other and going through that and going through the shame of it, being ashamed of it.
The shame's a big part of all of this.
Yeah, shame's a big part.
What will people say? What will people say?
But it's a good experience. It's like, you know, people say, oh, kids need to be bullied. And of course, that's kind of bullshit. But there's something in there that I think going through that and being exposed to the uncomfortable side of life early on makes for something, you know. Yeah,
like your characters, like, you know, a steel is forged through fire, they say, right?
Right.
And so it's the balance. So the balance is you go through shit and you survive, if you survive. And often they say what suffering is seasoning.
Yeah.
Right? And it makes you better storytellers. It gives you character. It gives you grit. It gives you resilience. The other aspect of this is that's a very American aspect of it. You grit and resilience, and you pull yourself from the bootstraps, and you're an individual. But I think the part that oftentimes doesn't get talked about is, but there's also scars.
Right.
And wounds and pain and trauma. And with immigrants in particular, and we're all many of us are immigrants, it's oftentimes seen as weakness to talk about it. Our job is to work and succeed and suffer quietly and suffer well. That's our job. Mm-hmm. And then you find out, like, all these uncles and aunties, you know, the elders, like, you find out later in life, oh, he was suffering from depression. Mm-hmm. Oh, they had anxiety. Mm-hmm. Oh, they lost a son. Mm-hmm. Damn. Can you imagine how different that person would have been if he just went to therapy?
Yeah, how it would have freed them.
And that also gives you that type of pity, too. Where you're talking about, like, you know, it's easy to just bash. But then I think as you get older, you're like, well, what did they go through? Mm-hmm. What language were they not taught? And I'm being metaphorical here. Love. Oftentimes, right? Yeah. What type of emotional pain did they have that they were unable to unburden? The privilege that you and I have being of this generation in America, right?
Right, exactly. My parents are artists. My dad's a writer and an actor, and you would think that someone like that, you know, that deals in emotion, basically, whose currency is emotion and thought and psychology and all of that, wouldn't have this sort of, wouldn't be closed off to therapy and to, you know, talking about their own trauma. But sometimes I feel like, you know, he grew up so poor that just wasn't, there was no room for that.
No, that's it. That's a privileged white person thing.
It's a privileged thing. But at the same time, that's why I love your book and what you're talking about here is that since, you know, growing up not poor or not in complete poverty gives us the privilege to go there. It's also kind of like our job to talk about it and to reveal that about those generations and to make it okay. Like you write in the book that because you were diagnosed with OCD and with anxiety, your dad was able to go, oh yeah,
I have it
me
too. Yeah, mine's worse.
And that must have been very liberating for him.
Well, even for my mom says this too, right? Because my mom, she has her husband and she has me, but she also said like, I'm proud of him. Like he goes to therapy, he buys the books, he works on himself, right? And it's very rare. Can you imagine this? Like a 70-plus-year-old South Asian Muslim man. I don't care what background you're from. I don't care if you're listening, if you're Eastern European, Russian, Jewish, like Chinese. It's like unheard of to see that generation kind of openly talk about it, be okay with me talking about it in a book, confronting it, and trying to get better. Right. Because he's like, at the end of the day, I have to learn how my mind works, and and because he, like me, suffered quietly. And then and like this, with the OCD in particular, it's an anxiety disorder where there's an electrical misfiring in the brain, right? So if you had the same misfiring in the brain, you, the listener, you would behave exactly like we would. But you don't know how your mind is working. You're like, am I crazy? What's happening? Because I know logically these are irrational fears and thoughts, but I'm overcome with such dread. And then I have to stop the thoughts, but me stopping the thoughts are these compulsions, and now I can't stop. And I want to stop, and I know how dumb this is. And then you get shame and you get guilt. And it's all internal. You just suffer. But then someone says, oh, no, you just have OCD. This is how your mind works. You're like, what?
Yeah.
And this is how you can change your behavior, and you can manage it, and maybe you might need medication. And guess what? You don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer quietly, and you can live a happy life.
And that is also mirrored in you writing this book about your experience, I think. Reading it and going, oh, it's not because I'm not good enough, or I don't know how to fit in, or I always, I just haven't found my people, or why can't I have a community? You read a book like this and you go, oh yeah, it's because there's certain, things from the outside that make me have this experience that aren't my fault, or there's trauma passed down. Yeah, there's trauma passed down that hasn't been talked about. There's generational trauma that's in my bones or my blood.
Literally in your bones. As the science shows, like there's a genetic component. It changes our genes.
Right, exactly. And so it's liberating, right? And I guess that's what that's what storytelling is, that it liberates you from feeling alone.
Well, you mentioned this to go off that point, and also mentioning how you found so much similarities, right? We are taught often to take away the specificity that makes us unique.
Right.
Make it bland. Yep. Make it mainstream. Mainstream is code word for white, or for your grandmother would have been code word for Christian, German, right? Yep. Take away all the ethnicity, take away the language, take away all the unique stuff, take away the flavor, because no one cares about the ethnic. It's too weird. Mm-hmm. Make it mainstream. And so people say, okay, I'll hide it. I'll hide this, and then you make these negotiations. How much of myself will I hide it until you're completely invisible?
Yep.
And so the decision I made early in my career, and the decision I made with the book that you read, is I refuse. Mm-hmm. I'll make a very culturally specific tale by us for everyone. I'll put in the mirch and the masala and the Islam and the Pakistani-ness and the Urdu and the pop culture and the, all of it. I'll mix it together, and I have faith that if it's a good story, people will come. And what I found out from the book, it's been out for a month, is so many people are like you. There's enough specificity where there's entry points.
Absolutely.
Someone says, I was left-handed.
Yep.
I used to wear husky pants.
Yep.
My parents were immigrants. I was an ESL. They're like, oh, I'm not Pakistani or Muslim, but, right? Or, oh, this gives me an interesting insight. I had no idea. Oh, and then there's a type of empathy that builds.
Right.
And whenever, I don't know, I'm sure with you, anytime you make it bland, no one wants that meal.
No, of course. I remember when I was writing my first show, I would watch John Leguizamo's show Freak. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it, and I've read the script for the first three, right?
Me too. And I would watch it
Spikorama, Freak,
Yeah. over and over and over and over again. And the special starts with him coming out on stage on Broadway, and he goes like, all my Latinos bark. And then like, there's a huge like, woo, woo, woo. Then he's like, all my black people meow. And you hear, like a huge amount of people go meow. And then he goes, and all my white people. And then he says a really long sentence in Spanish that of course they can't repeat. So it's a laugh, right? But what he does right away is establish his community. And I would sit there and think like, oh my God, like I was like envious. I was like, I don't have that. Like, what am I going to say? All my German, Jewish, Romanian people who don't know what they are grew up in New York. Yeah, right. So I say schnitzel, and that the one person would go, schnitzel?
And then you get depressed like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
You just walk off the stage.
And I was like, who's going to watch this? It's, oh my God, who's going to come see this? And, then it reminds me of one of my favorite moments in movie history ever, in Life of Brian, where he's standing at the window. He goes, "Go away, you are all individuals." And they go, "We are all individuals." And one guy turns to the camera and goes, "I'm not."
That's it.
That's me. And so then I started doing the show, and people started coming up to me and going, "Oh my God, yes." And it's that, right? As you say, the more specific you get, or I do this voice on a video game, so I get invited to panels, and they say, "What's your advice to people who want to be a voice actor," or something like that. And now I'm always like, well, and it's funny because I don't know if you feel the same way. I have to like practice it. I have to remind myself. I'm not like just done. Yeah, I'm great the way I am. I have to remind myself. But I always tell people now, the thing that you think is like embarrassing and annoying and shameful about yourself, and that you have to hide or get rid of, that's your gold.
Oh yeah,
that's
that's a very
power.
Yeah, you're right, because if we Brene Brown this, she's like vulnerability, but it's precisely, yes, I have to remind myself too, because they call it fake it until you make it, but oftentimes in our cultures, right, we were taught to be humble. So other people praise you never praise yourself. Right, but there's also a cost to that. With shame and self-deprecation, it's that you sometimes lose your confidence.
Yeah.
So you need to build yourself up, but you also need mentors, you need friends, you need someone. Like I mentioned in the book, sometimes all it takes is one friend. One family member says, "You got something.
Right.
Lucie, you're funny. You got something. You should go on stage and share that story."
Yeah.
And it's one of those things about the power of storytelling is, I wrote this book, and you mentioned about my parents getting arrested, right? The reason why I took some time to write this is because also when you write a memoir-ish story, it's not just your story, right? It's your mom, it's your dad, if you have siblings, I don't, right? It's everyone else. And people say sometimes memoir is a type of theft, and you have to be like you have gold in your hands, you have someone else's life, and so you have a responsibility, right, as a storyteller, because once it's in a book and they're not writers. Right? It's etched forever in people's minds. So like you have to honor that story. So I wanted to make sure my parents were done with their case. They were okay. And my parents gave me the blessing. And especially my parents' story, which is like they were arrested and this friggin' case lasted 10 years and we lost everything. My only concern with the book was, man, I hope people don't humiliate my parents again. I hope they don't get mocked at. I hope they don't get laughed at. I hope they're not punchlines, because they went through so much. That was my only fear. But what I've seen, and going to your point, is the book's a month out, exact opposite. In a strange way, people are like, "I love your parents. I love your family.
Love your
I'm
parents,
sorry they
too."
went through this."
Yeah.
And so many people have said, "I can't believe you wrote that. My family also had an experience with the prison industrial complex. I have a story. I'm embarrassed to write it. But look, you wrote it and people embrace you. People like you. Maybe I can write my story." That's the opening, right? It's like someone just has to do it. And then once people say, "Oh, that green hamburger was beloved, I can now bring on my green hamburger."
Right.
I can wear these jeans.
Yeah.
Right? There's something really profound about being seen and also being loved and being accepted.
And I think also taking the taboo away from it, right? Like, especially when it comes to prison or shame.
Mental health, divorce,
right, mental
poverty.
health. Exactly. It's like you don't talk about it, or there's this one narrative, or it's used. And that's what I really appreciated, because you say in the book, okay, and this is kind of as much as I'm going to say about my parents' story, because it's really their story to tell.
Yeah, that's right.
And I appreciate that, because of course if you would really go into the details, people would eat it up because
Salacious.
it's sensation.
There you go. It's always like that. It was like that, but when they were in jail, tell me more.
Of course.
Tell me
Of
more.
course. I mean, people are obsessed with true crime, right?
yeah.
And it's like this, because it's this taboo. Oh my God, what is that? And what happened to them in jail? And how
Lucie's
many
next
times?
podcast is Immigrant to Crime. Launching next month.
The true crimes of immigrants.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if everything you've done, automatically that becomes like the #1 hit? You're like, everything I've done in my life, nothing matters, but immigrant true crime is what makes me like a multimillionaire.
Listen, this is a good idea. I think we're going to close up shop and just rebrand because people are obsessed with fucking true crime. But yeah, so like it takes the taboo away and also it's like, yeah, as everything, it's nuanced. There isn't just, it's not black and white. It's not, only these types of people go to jail or only these types of people. And as you say, like, yeah, there's a lot of decisions that they made that I wouldn't have made. But like, this is the story, right? And it's part of my story, and it's not, I shouldn't be ashamed or I shouldn't not tell the story. I mean, what will people say? I'm going to butcher this.
Lokia Bolinge.
Lokia Bolinge?
That was very good. That was
phonetic. I can do things phonetically. I can't read.
That was excellent. Oh, well done. I'm actually very... Yeah, Lokia Bolinge.
Lokia Bolinge.
Well, look at that.
What will people say?
What will people say?
So in your culture or in the Pakistani culture, that's even a bigger deal for you to do that, right? To come out and talk about it.
For all of us, right? Because I was talking to someone... Latina, and she's like, yeah, what will people say? Same thing. And Puerto Rican book club, a Puerto Rican book club wrote the book, which is amazing. And she's like, yep, what will people say? That's what we all kind of gather around. It's a very tribal, communal, immigrant mindset, right? Because you come here, you have to work hard. Everyone realizes, like, the immigrants know this, right? Like, if you talk to immigrant parents, what do Americans worship? Money, right? So, okay, you got to make money. Americans worship money. Whoever has money has power. And as long as the power is in the hands of the white man, everyone's happy. But we just take some of it for ourselves, right? And how do you show happiness? How do you show success? Buy things. And so house,
right?
Car,
right?
Good college, good kid. Everyone's smiling, even though they're hiding the pain.
Yeah.
Right? Lo kya bolenge? What will people say? Can't talk about the divorces because we come from a good family.
Right.
Can't talk about the mental health because we come from a good family. Can't talk about where Uncle Nicky went for 2 years. He went to Italy, or Uncle Salman went to no. Like, where did Uncle Salman go all of a sudden? Pakistan. And then you later find out, oh, he went to prison.
Yeah.
Like every community has a story because you have to promote a fiction.
Yeah.
And it's a fictional narrative that gets promoted, but we hide then everything else. The pain, the trauma, all the real stuff we hide. And then it's so interesting the type of impact that has on a community. If you don't air the dirty laundry, how are you going to clean the laundry?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Like, how are you going to talk about these problems? How are you going to talk about solutions if you don't even acknowledge the problems?
Yeah.
And so the thing is with the book and this particular story, so many people have emailed me just saying thank you. I thank you for talking about mental health. Thank you for shattering the model minority myth. Thank you for talking about all the warts and the problems. And going back to your superhero, which the advice you give people is that once you go deeper and deeper and deeper and reveal these aspects of yourself, right? Like, hey, you might think I'm crushing it as an actor or a voice talent, but let me tell you, people go, oh, even you? I saw you on stage. You were so like. Everyone loved you. He goes, but sometimes I don't love myself.
Right? Yeah.
And they're like, wow. And this is why I think the origin story is so important. And I'm glad you picked up on that. Is first and foremost, I did want to, as a writer, establish a narrative. My parents are people.
Right.
And then they become a headline.
Yeah.
And they become flattened.
Yeah.
And before you come up with whatever judgment you want on our family, which is fine, realize human beings are complex.
Right.
And they have narratives.
Yep.
Right. And also, you might assume, oh, Wajahat is successful. He wrote a book. He writes for the New York Times. No. I was a fat, shy kid who literally, if you said, get up and recite a story in front of class or punch yourself in the face, I'm like, I will be punching myself in the face for the next 10 minutes. And I think that's important because the story where people say, oh, you are so amazing. You are so great. That's I wish I could be you. That's just a boring story. The more interesting story is, no, I wasn't like that. I was a shy fat kid.
And also, I'm still not like that.
Yeah.
That too.
That
I
too.
always say I wrote a whole show because of this like weird fame that I got through voicing this character,
Overwatch, right?
Yeah. And all of a sudden I had all these followers and I'd go to Comic Cons and be treated like a celebrity.
That's
like people would
amazing.
cry when they met me, but like my bathtub's in my kitchen. In my apartment. You know what I mean?
I know.
And so it's like that for me, and like I have to like lug my suitcase. I like get picked up in the Escalade, you know, and first class this and fucking suites and that, and then I get dropped off at home and I'm like stepping over dried cockroaches and fucking snot dripping down the walls of my like my building's gnarly, you know, and then my bathtub's in my kitchen, and if I want to like do some sort of a live video, I have to like pick one corner in my apartment that seems like I'm a normal human being. I just had an interaction the other day on Twitter. The guy who writes Pokemon and stuff wrote me. He's like, "Hey, I'm a big fan," and I was like, "Oh, cool, I'm a big fan too." And then I said something like about my bathtub in my kitchen. He just wrote, "Oh no," and then stopped writing. And I was like, "Oh God."
That's like, oh,
you know? But it's interesting too because of course people want princesses and princes and they want fairy tales because then they think, you know, that could be their life.
That's
and
right.
maybe they don't have to have pain and suffering and reality.
But you know that this life is pain.
Of course, exactly.
And so and that's, you know, that's the thing, is that you I think it's okay to say that it's the balance.
Yeah.
And I tried in that book, right? It's the American dream and the American nightmare. There's joy and there's sadness.
Yeah.
There's success and there's pain.
Right.
There's hope and there's disappointment. It's called life.
Yes.
And so this cookie cutter narrative that we are sold, it's fiction, and it's okay to have moments in your life where it didn't work out.
Yes.
Right. Where the checklist of success that is handed down to immigrant kids blew up.
Right.
And my checklist blew up, right, when my parents went to jail.
Right.
But then you find your own checklist. And I feel like there's when people, especially these stories when they're like, oh, like you went through shit, but you survived. Oh, this didn't break you. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, you had pain and you had the scars and the warts and you talk about it. And I think the book, it does end on hope, because if you stay too long in one of the two, if you stay too long in the pain, it
eats you up.
It eats you up. Mm. The rage eats you up. Mm-hmm. The sadness eats you up. And if you stay too long in the joy, you might as well be like a high in the clouds, completely removed from not only your own pain, but the pain of so many of your fellow Americans and human beings who need empathy, right? Like it takes you to another level. We're like, hey, everybody, just lean in. And they're like, I can't lean in. Yeah. I literally can't go anywhere. I just need some help. There's a boot on my neck. Yeah. And I feel like it's one of those situations where the reason why I still land on hope is because if you tell me there's too much shit, it's all going to hell, what you're saying is you're telling me to invest in apathy and cynicism. And that's cheap and lazy, right? And I have kids.
Right.
And I can't tell my kids that their inheritance is going to be that they're going to suffer. And their job is just to suffer well. And you just suffer well and take it. But like, no, we have to do something. Like I choose to invest in hope because at the very least, we're still alive during a pandemic, right? Many people are not. We made it. Yeah. You and I made it.
Yeah.
Right? The story is still being written. The page turns. It could always bring a plot twist. And, like you mentioned, my daughter survived cancer. Like, my daughter was supposed to die, but she's alive.
Yeah.
Right? So how can you tell me not to have hope?
Right. And, life is beautiful in that way. Like, it's beautiful because it takes you through the ups and downs, and that's how you become a person, you know? Right. So your kids, do they speak Urdu? Are you raising them?
This is my wife and I, literally right before I left for New York, we were just lamenting because my entire intention was to teach them Urdu. Mm-hmm. And, my wife, it's just one of those things where, because my parents are in California, her parents are in Florida. Like, if there was more of that mix, they would have gone it. But I still think, like, we were just lamenting. I'm like, this is a miss. Like, and I can't believe I effed up here.
But they're not too, they're still
No,
very
752. So I was
Yeah.
really thinking about this. I'm like, there's still time.
Oh yeah, because my grandma was like a language development psychologist, and she
Ooh.
always told us that the language center in the brain closes. I mean, this is like
12?
Around 12, which is why I don't really have an accent in English. And my sister, who's 4
you don't
years
at all.
older, yeah, she was like 12, 13 when we moved here. She has a bit of an accent.
Oh, she still does.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's still time.
I got 4 years.
We are running out of time.
Oh,
But
that was
there's,
a great segue. Look at
thank
that.
you.
That's why they
Okay.
pay you the big money.
Two things. No, a few things. One thing, I love proverbs and expressions
Great.
in different languages. I found one that is apparently Urdu, and two. One is Kota Chana Bajaigana. Is that really terrible? Empty vessels make more noise.
Oh, nice. Can I see that real quick?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Urdu is Kota Chana Baje Gana. Oh, I don't know. Baje Gana. Gana means Baje means to make. The Gana means song. Chana,
song, so it's even more beautiful than the translation.
So this is this is old. This is hardcore Urdu. I'm even gonna mess this up. But yours is better than Pani mein rehna, magarmach se.
I love that. So I was going to ask you, it is hard to live in Rome and fight with the Pope, apparently, is the translation.
Pani mein rehna, magarmach se bahar, which means live in the water but stay away from the alligators.
Wow. That's
Pani mein rehna?
crazy.
Yeah, pani mein rehna means stay in the water. Magarmach is like alligator or crocodile. It's written as Saybair, but I'm thinking se means like se. I think bear. Yeah, bear. Yeah, bahar, which probably means pani mein rehna magarmach se bear, which means magarmach se bear. So stay away from the crocodiles, which is pretty genius, actually.
Pretty genius.
Yeah.
And so, is the water America and the crocodiles racists?
Ooh, that's it. I would say stay in America, and yeah, actually, I would stay away from white supremacy.
Yeah, right.
But the thing is this: if white supremacy is part and parcel of America, how can you truly be safe?
Yeah.
Until you dismantle it and reform it.
Right. Which can only be done by telling the stories and speaking out, right? Yeah. And yeah, right? I mean, or how else? I mean, that's a whole nother podcast.
But that's not anyone who's speaking Urdu, they're like, you butchered Urdu. I'm like, it's transliterated on the pages, English. I'm sorry. But I tried my best.
It's my fault. Okay, then now I just have very quickly, whatever comes to mind. This is, the Proust questionnaire.
Yes.
This is the Pohl question.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay, so first thing that comes to mind, who would you cast as the Statue of Liberty in a movie about the Statue of Liberty?
Oh, that's such a good question. Rosie Perez.
Yes, I love it. What the fuck? Get off of my fucking island.
Right, pure.
Okay, if you could add one face to Mount Rushmore, who would you add?
Harriet Tubman.
Nice.
Because she got erased from the dollar bill. I'm still waiting for the $10 bill.
We want the $10 bill, motherfuckers. What's the most American thing you've ever done?
Oh, okay. Most American thing I've ever done is once I bought a TV on credit card I didn't have the money for.
Yes, I love it.
Buying shit we don't have money for.
Yes, 100%. What's the most Pakistani thing you've ever done?
Oh, sold that same TV in a garage sale because I felt guilty that I had bought it. That's actually a true story.
I love that. That's awesome. If you could add one amendment to the Constitution, what would it be?
Oh, that's a very good question. Another amendment to the Constitution would be the right. You know what? Why not? Just go bold. The right. Every American, every child has the right to a free education.
Fucking love it.
Every child.
100%. And watch, America, how great this country will be. Okay, you're gonna need to run for president pretty soon then. What is your favorite word in Urdu?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's not necessarily Urdu; it's Arabic, but it's the first word that came to mind. I would say inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah means God willing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful
and
word.
you can say it for so many different things.
It's like the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. Okay. 2 more questions. If you could deport one American person, who would you deport?
That's hilarious. Stephen Miller.
Nice.
It'd be funny.
Yep. I think that's good.
It'd be karma.
Yeah. I would love that. Love that. Preferably to a country where everybody has amazing hair.
To Mexico.
Yes.
Like, because you know why? Real quick, he got radicalized apparently when he was in high school, and he got radicalized against Latinos. So like the most Latin country, the most Latin part of where all the Latinos are super Latino.
Yeah, I love it.
Whatever country that is. Go there, Stephen Miller.
What American food would you ban if you were president?
Oh, that's very good. I'm against banning food.
I love that.
Fuck you, meatloaf.
Now that meatloaf is also dead,
yeah.
it's okay.
Anti-vaxxer, man.
Yeah, it's okay to ban
meatloaf. Yeah. I would do everything for love.
Meatloaf is gross. What the fuck? I've never had meatloaf, for the record. And this is probably the most important question. Do you know how I can meet David Hasselhoff?
You know what? If you actually send a request, have you done this yet? Have you sent a request to his team?
Like a
podcast request?
Oh, no, no. People have been telling me to DM him. You think I should just go to his team?
If you DM him, if you tweet at him, and if you go to his team and say, I'm a big fan and I want you on the podcast, I think he'll do it.
Okay. He's not an immigrant, though.
Doesn't matter. If you literally show him this.
doesn't
you know
matter.
what? Actually, in all seriousness, if you take a photo of you, like literally like this, and say, David, this is my podcast studio. Like literally, I have you in my podcast studio. I would love to have you on. Like tweet at him or DM him.
Unlimited cheeseburgers.
Yeah, unlimited. Just tweet at him, DM him. I would not be surprised.
Okay, I'm going to try that. All right. Well, I'm guessing that you would want to plug your book. Is there something else?
You did such a nice job. No, I mean, you were so lovely in plugging the book that I didn't have to be shameless about it.
Everybody has to read this book. Go back to where you came from and other helpful recommendations on how to become an American. Wajahat Ali. Go and read the book. Do it now. Don't be stupid. Don't be a fool. It's out. You can buy it everywhere.
You can buy it everywhere. If you can, please try to support your local bookshop.
Yes, agreed. 100%. I got this at Barnes and Nobles. Is that?
It's fair. It's fair.
There's only one left, I think, in the whole country.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and where can people find you on social media?
On the Twitters, I'm at Wajahat Ali, and I'm trying to do more of the Insta, so I'm Insta Wajahat.
Great. Follow him.
If you liked what you just heard, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, recommend to all your friends, and if you hated it, recommend it to your enemies. Thank you for listening to Immigrant Jam, the podcast with me, Lucie Pohl. Have a delicious and nutritious day.